In this lecture series, we are so grateful to the congregation here at First Methodist because they were the ones that I talked to first. They welcomed this idea of visiting different congregations with open arms. Reverend Hal got me an invitation to the clergymen who meet once a month for lunch, and we spun the idea on them. So really, the idea gained momentum and roots right here in this congregation. We've had a lot of fun so far, and I think it's been very illuminating going to North Hills Christian Reformed Church, Northminster Presbyterian. Last month we had 100 people there. This month at United Methodist, and next month we're going to be at the Barn Church at Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church. And what I find interesting, and I don't want to steal Jane's thunder, is that the founder, or the person who built the barn,
the early owners of that were members of this church.
Okay, the early owners of that dairy farm were members of this church. And yes, that church is an old dairy barn, and the Sunday school classrooms are still in the milking parlor of that barn. So it's a wonderful historic structure, and we hope you join us next month as we go to Old Lakey's Dairy Barn, now the Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church, which I understand is the only barn church in the state of Michigan. And finally, on Wednesday, May 18th, is a very special opportunity to go to the Bharatiya Temple on Adams Road at South Boulevard. The Hindu community has just expanded their house of worship. Their new gathering space will be consecrated in June, depending on whether they have an occupancy permit. When we come for our evening lecture, we'll be able to find out if we get a sneak preview, if we can see the inside of the temple. But it was inaugurated in 1981, and the temple was the first to serve this area's Hindu population. So I think it's a really exciting ending to this lecture series. Tonight, we're going to hear from a real Troy person. Jane Sager was born in Troy, of parents who moved here in the 1930s. She has attended this church her entire life. I don't think anyone has a better, more personal perspective of this church. I can't tell you more about Jane than this. I met her when she did a Depression glass lecture at the museum probably 12 years ago. But what I've learned from her since is that the prism that she looks through every day is blessed with her faith and her sense of humor, because she never calls me or walks into my office that she doesn't say, "So do you want to hear a joke?" And she always leaves me with a smile on my face. And I think that's an incredible gift. So this evening, would you please welcome a true member and community member of Troy and this wonderful congregation, Jane Sager.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorraine. I don't know if this works or not, so I'll talk loud. Okay. Let me find my paperwork. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much. As she said, I'm Jane Sager. Now, when Lorraine Campbell first contacted Troy First about this lecture series, she talked to Reverend Hal, as she mentioned, and to our facility coordinator, Lisa Head. They very enthusiastically agreed to participate in this. And soon after that, Reverend Hal was telling me about it. And I agreed with him. It was a fine idea. Somehow, and it's still kind of fuzzy to me, I ended up being the person giving the lecture. And because there's several people in our congregation who are also members of the Historical Society, Reverend Hal said, "You and your crew will do a great job taking care of the details." Now, we didn't even know we were a crew before that time, but I guess we are. So at this time, I'd like to say thank you to the gals in the crew that arranged all the refreshments and the details. Would you gals stand up and please give them a hand? Come on. Now, one of Reverend Hal's admirable and irritating talents is the ability to delegate before you even realize you've been delegated. So don't worry, I know where he works. Let me start out with just a little bit of information about me. As Lorraine said, my parents moved to Troy in the 1930s and joined the Methodist Episcopal Church, and I was born several years later. So this church truly is my home church. And as she also mentioned, I have an unofficial title as the resident joke teller. My belief is that everyone needs at least 2 or 3 chuckles a day. So let me get that out of the way first. A man was stranded on a deserted island for 20 years. Finally, a ship came to rescue him. When the boat got to the shore to pick him up, they realized that he had built 3 huts. And they said to him, "Why would you build 3 huts? It's just you on this island." And he said, "Well, the first hut is my home, and the second hut is my church." And they said, "Isn't that nice that you've built a place to worship? But what's the third church, or the third hut?" He said, "Oh, that's the church I used to go to." Now, in every culture, the places of worship are an important element in the community. They provide a focal point for faith and for social connections. They help to give the community its sense of identity. Founded in 1827, First United Methodist Church of Troy is the oldest continuing religious congregation in the county of Oakland. Rather than reciting a very long list of dates and facts about our church and its history, I felt it would be better to give you a thumbnail review of the highlights of this church and try to give you a sense of this congregation's people and mission and vision. The earliest years, the 1980s, or the 1800s and the 1900s, Troy Methodist filled the role as a focal point. In a time when there was no fast foods, no restaurants, or very few theaters, and not much money to spend on those types of things, Troy Methodist offered a place for people to feel connected to each other. As with all churches, there were dinners, bazaars, rummage sales, ice cream socials, picnics, special programs for holidays, mother-daughter banquets, and other programs of entertainment. And these events and activities included an invitation to the whole community. Now, in 1808, a handbill advertised the Ladies' Aid and Epworth League, which is the youth group of the day, offering an evening of entertainment with Squire Judkins Appleby. I never knew what an Appleby was, and I still don't know, but they advertised it. In a 1936 bulletin, the following announcement was listed. On Monday, October 12th, the Troy Brotherhood will meet at the Troy Church at 8:15 p.m. This is for all men and their wives, and for young men and their sweethearts. Let's make this a real lively meeting and everybody come. A committee has been appointed to provide a program, a potluck lunch after the meeting. The little white church never had its own well. So after the church was modernized in 1904, all the water had to be carried in for use in the new kitchen. When a dinner was served, they would run a garden hose from the parsonage next door through the kitchen window into the sink. I wonder what the health department would say about that in today's world. When Troy installed city water, we finally had water for our church. Now, I remember Mr. Frank Sherman. He was the church treasurer for more than 30 years in the early half of the 1900s. He was a focused and very conscientious person who always insisted the Sunday offering had to be counted and recorded right after all the Sunday services were finished. I remember my brothers and I playing in the church while my father was one of the people who assisted him. Now, Gladys Hughes remembered when she was one of two people who were assisting him, and they were off by 10 cents. Mr. Sherman was not willing to leave until they had accounted for that 10 cents. After more than 2 hours, it was decided they would have to finish it the next day. When they all got up to leave, they found a dime on one of the chairs. Now, Gladys has never been sure if the dime was there the whole time, or perhaps the other person had simply put it there so that the record would balance. Now, from a historical point of view, you need to understand about Methodists and committees and potlucks. The Methodist denomination was founded by John Wesley in the 1700s. He took the good news of Jesus Christ out of the formal sanctuaries of the Church of England and went to the poorest areas and the poorest people with a message of hope and forgiveness. Instead of establishing just one congregation, he, like St. Paul, would found a group and then return later on his circuit of travel to pray with them, to encourage and support their faith, and teach methods of study and living to help them to grow as Christians. Hence the name Methodist came into use. Also, with this background, each new congregation was responsible for its own support, its own activities and decisions. So Methodists became very good at having committee meetings, just to take care of all those details. Likewise, sharing food became a very staple activity for Methodist Church. Let me give you another chuckle. A teacher assigned her class the assignment of bringing in something that represented or was symbolic of the church that they attended. So on that day, she asked Jacob what he had brought. Jacob stood and said, "I'm Jewish. I brought a Star of David." Then she asked Mary, and Mary said, "I'm Catholic. I brought my rosary beads." Then she asked Billy what he had brought. Billy said, "I'm Methodist. I brought a casserole." The history and traditions of the Methodist Church are full and rich and much more complex than the few little statements I've just made. And that's true also of the First United Methodist Church of Troy. In more than 180 years, there have been several name changes, more than 46 pastors. We've had times of growth, times of trouble, times of both rejoicing and sorrow, and the firm commitment of all those who came before us. The tradition of the traveling preacher continues even to this day, with smaller congregations still sharing a pastor. Troy First, in the past years, have shared at different times with Utica Methodist Church, Warren, Clawson, and lastly with the Big Beaver United Methodist Church. Troy First did not become a single charge church until 1964. We actually had a pastor assigned just for us. By the mid-1950s, the congregation had grown to the point where we were bursting at the seams. In the Little White Church, Sunday school classes were held in many places outside the church, including the parsonage, several nearby members' homes, and even the fire station on Livernois Road. I remember climbing through an opening in the fence at the back of the property to go to Sunday school at the Parker sisters' house, and later on to the Barnard's house. The church office was in the upstairs room at the parsonage. The kitchen, small and narrow, was a real handicap for anything that the women wanted to do, and the dining room was too small for everything. So in 1956, the congregation pledged an extra $51,000 over a 3-year period to purchase a new church site and to start a building fund. 9.9 acres of the old swanky Eastwood Hills Golf Course on Livernois Road was purchased, and our outdoor Easter service was held there that same year. This church sits on what once was the 9th green. In May of 1962, we saw the groundbreaking. In September of that year, the cornerstone was laid. And on March 17th of 1963, the morning worship began in our old church with a presentation of the keys to the new church. Then the whole congregation walked or drove to the new building, and the worship service was led by the bishop. It was a wonderful improvement to have enough room to continue and increase the many mission projects and service activities, worship and Christian education offerings of this congregation. Some of the other extra activities that took place included the bowling league, the adult Sunday school Live Wires family camping group, which camped for over 50 years and often had 3 or 4 generations of one family in the group. There was also an early softball team that played in a league with other Christian churches. Now, both my dad and my brother played on that early team. My brother would always call Dad Father, not Dad. During one game, a player from the other team said to my brother, "I thought we were playing a Methodist team, not the Catholic team." He said, "Well, you are playing the Methodist team." He said, "But you keep calling to the Father out on the field." My brother had to laugh and explain that's because it really is my father. During those first several decades, connections were made with other groups who rented space in our church. The Troy Co-op Nursery began in 1971 and continues to meet here even now. The Guardian Angels Roman Catholic Church rented space for their new mission church in 1970. And in 1972, the mission church was organized as an independent parish, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. 10 years later, they held their last Mass here at Troy First before moving into their own building. The beautiful plaque on the outside of our sanctuary is a gift from them. Other groups rented the space on a single or short-term basis. Now, since moving into our current church, the outreach programs here at Troy First have continued and expanded. We began hosting for SOS Shelter. Blood drives are held several times a year. Our then pastor, Terry Allen, brought his passion for the crop walk to us and helped to organize that ongoing mission project here in the city. We serve a meal once a month at Baldwin Center in Pontiac. We help staff the Hope Warming Center 4 days every wintertime. And we joined with the First United Methodist Church of Monrovia, Libya, in a covenant agreement. And the list goes on and on. Worship here at Troy First is usually traditional and with communion once a month. For several years, we were able to have a contemporary service called Find Your Faith, but we were unable to sustain it. Perhaps it could be reinstated in the future. The membership, education, and ministries committees sponsor programs and activities for the congregation. These have included Disciple Bible Study, monthly dinner groups, men's breakfast group, Logos, which is a midweek program for kids and adults that include dinner, service, Bible study, yoga, and much more, family game nights, the Advent devotional booklet, a prayer chain, picnics, trick or trunk at Halloween time, and that list goes on and on. We also have a Stephen Ministries organization as well. Our Sunday school program engages the children in mission activities and projects as part of their Christian education. Children make small gifts for shut-ins, and they collect money for missions. The senior high youth group, called UMYF, goes on summer work mission trips. They give a musical every year during worship. They plan and present the Easter sunrise service, and their list goes on and on too. Middle school students have a summer mission week called Mission Possible that gives them the chance to actually go and do service projects locally. The Good News Adult Sunday School class presents an original play every year for worship, and our other adult classes offer a wider range of topics and format. Music is an important part of all faith communities. Here at Troy First, we are truly blessed to have wonderful, talented members and staff. There are both a chancel and a youth choir, 3 bell choirs, and members who offer their abilities playing instruments and singing for worship and for many other occasions. The United Methodist Women Organization, UMW, is a vital part of this church and has been for more than 100 years. As is true in every community of faith, the women are quietly going about the business of getting things done. Events and activities include special programs, dinners, retreats, luncheons, the Christmas tea, the cookie walk and craft sale, rummage sale, used book sale, prayer quilt ministry, and so much more. They raise money for missions, serve on committees, and stock and maintain the kitchen. You know, I'm worn out just reading all of this. So let me give you another chuckle. A police officer spotted a car weaving all around back and forth on the road. When he stopped the car, he realized it was a local minister. "Reverend," he said, "have you been drinking? Your driving is very erratic." "Oh, no," said the minister, "I don't drink." The officer noticed he had a thermos bottle on the seat and said, "What's in your bottle?" He said, "Well, it's just water. I carry water with me." The officer asked, "Could I see it?" So he gave him the bottle, and the officer opened it and looked in, sniffed it, and he said, "Reverend, this is not water, this is wine." The minister said, "He did it again." In 45 plus years that we've been in this building, the need for more space resulted in 1 interior remodel and 2 major additions. In 1978, we saw the need for more classrooms, so folding room divider doors were added to the fellowship hall downstairs. In 1989, the need for more space became evident, and a major addition was started. Classrooms, a youth room, a storage area, and an additional furnace downstairs were added. The new upper-level space included a large multi-purpose room and new restrooms. After we entered the 21st century, a new sound and multimedia system was added in 2001. In 2002, with faith in our God to help us do it again, we once more tackled a major addition and remodel, plus enlarging the parking lot and doing some changes to the landscape. Troy First has become a very busy place. Our building now is used by many different organizations and groups. Among the events held here are the Historical Society Antique Appraisal Fair, the Depression Glass Club meets here, Contact Testing, Recovery Inc., the Royal Scottish Country Dancers, birthday parties, wedding and baby showers, basketball and volleyball groups, and this list goes on and on too. The United Methodist Church offers to all open minds, open hearts, and open doors. Here at Troy First, we offer not only somewhere to pray, renew, and practice your faith, but a community that seeks to gather all generations for worship, discipleship, and ministry. We invite you to take a look around before you leave tonight if you'd like to. Check out the Christian Life Center, the chapel, the lower level of the CLC. In the older area downstairs is our Spirit Seeker Sunday School section with its painted murals, and the previous choir room is now a theater. The upper level multi-purpose room has become the church offices and work areas, and the hallway that leads to between the sanctuary and the CLC. When the spring weather arrives, check out the Memorial Garden on the east end of the building and the meditation circle in the traffic area, in the traffic island. I thank you for your kind attendance and for your attention. Thank you. We have time for some question and answer. If there are any, I'll try to answer if I can. Yes?
In the old church,
Yes.
on the museum grounds, the first thing I noticed when I went in and asked my daughter, how come there's no center aisle, which most churches do have, and you didn't, you just had it on the side. And I walked in here, and the first thing they said to my husband was, and now they switched, they put a center aisle. Was there some reason that you didn't have it in the old and the new field? Was there something?
I'm not sure why originally that was set up with the altar area in the corner so that when you walked in, you're looking toward the back corner. In the 1940s, that church was remodeled. My father, being a carpenter, was the one that did it, and they switched the whole orientation. And the altar area was switched to the front where the big stained glass window is, and they used the same pews, so there was no center aisle, there was two side aisles at that time. That's how it looked while I was growing up there. Yeah.
I've asked a lot of other Methodist ministers that same question, and there are other denominations that don't have a center aisle. I've heard two explanations, and both of them make sense. The one is it puts the congregation in one place. It doesn't divide you. So most everybody is sitting together. The other comment I heard was for some communities, it was to distinguish themselves from the Catholic tradition of having a church that was cruciform, that had an aisle that ran from the front and the back in general, a cross aisleway that was the symbol of the crucifix in the floor plan of the church. So those are two explanations.
Originally also, that little first church building was not Methodist. It was originally, if I can find it in our little booklet, originally deeded by Johnson Niles to an Episcopal church, an Episcopal group, the old Episcopal church and boarding school, with the stipulation that if that congregation ceased to function, that it be sold to some sort of Episcopal, used for that purpose. And so in 1837, it was purchased by the Troy group and became the Troy Methodist Church at that time. So we were not, this congregation was not the original owners or builders of that building. That we got it with the orientation in the corner that way. Yes?
When you were talking about music, I wondered if you would like to add to your presentation that what you got in the organ recently?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. How long ago was that, Jane? A couple months ago. The organ we had was on its last legs, to put it nicely. It sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. Our organist had to practice both organ music and piano music, because if that Sunday it chose not to work, she'd have to switch to the piano. And with faith that God would help us do it again, we started a campaign and raised the funds to purchase a new organ just a few months ago. So we do have a wonderful new organ now.
It was installed in November, dedicated in January.
Yes, installed in November, dedicated in January.
Is
So
it pipe or is it?
no, it is not pipe organ. Yes.
I wonder if you could say something about the design of this church. It always strikes me as being inside a kind of an upside-down Viking boat.
It kind of does, doesn't it? When this church was designed and built, I was a teenager. So I don't have specific memories as to the decision-making process that went through to pick this particular design and so forth. I don't know if there's any members here that have been around longer than I have or have memory of it better. But I know they went through several discussions at that time about whatever, and I'm not sure what the reason was that they ended up with this design, but they did.
Well, the upside down.
My father, no, my father was retired by the time, so we had an architect that was hired and a contractor, and it was quite a large undertaking, of course. So.
The upside down boat is a common form of architecture for inside churches.
Yes.
And they have no theological reason, that's just what they did.
This is a very common form or shape for a lot of different churches. Yes.
What I find interesting now is in the last 3 months, I've been in 3 churches though that were all built in the same era, basically the 1960s.
And all different.
But the similarity is brick walls and wooden ceilings. And basically beautiful laminate beams that are very obvious components of the architecture. So whether it was fan-shaped or a traditional, praying hand shape or the inverted boat, the selection of materials and the simplicity of design, not having plastered walls, but leaving the exterior brick, the natural brick, and then beautiful wood ceilings is a real common occasion.
Yes, it is. And these are not laminate beams. Just so you know. Any other questions? Yes.
I remember reading something about in the early days, either the school used the church or the church used the school. Do you have any?
Yes, in our earliest days, before they had purchased a church building, the group met in each other's homes and then met in a school for a while and that sort of thing. For about 10 years ago or a little more, we celebrated our 175th anniversary, and at that time I was part of the group that did as Lorraine calls it, that funky little book. And so we do have this, and it includes a lot of that early history. I took some of my information for the talk from that, but not all of it, because otherwise we'd be here forever with me reading off long, dull dates, and I did enough of that. So, any other questions? Yes.
I just wanted to point out to the people who are not familiar with our sanctuary that those tables in front are not permanent fixtures.
That's correct.
That they're up there preparing for bells to play on Sunday.
Yes.
And they'll be covered with cloths and they'll be very beautiful.
Yes, they will. They had handbell practice here for the youngest children, so the tables are still there and that sort of thing. Usually it's not quite so congested up here. I kind of stood in the middle trying to distract you a little bit. I don't know if that helped. Any other questions? Yes?
You don't have a communion rail?
Yes, we do, but it's further back. You can't see it from all these tables. You're welcome to come up here when we're done if you'd like to look at it and see. Yes? I beg your pardon? The altar at this point is just right here where the Bible and the candles are. At this point in time, we have our altar extended forward At other times, it's back behind the communion rail. It's movable, so we've used it in a lot of different configurations. You never know what Methodists are going to do. We tend to kind of get carried away sometimes. Any others? Yes, Lorraine?
Jane, would you tell them what, and I think this is really important, and very, very precious, what you brought with you from your original church, besides the congregation itself?
Well, the church bell came, of course. The original bell in the steeple of the Little White Church came with us. It was moved before the actual move when the congregation did, and installed in our steeple outside. And that was very special. There was articles in the newspaper about it and that sort of thing. So we were glad the museum got the church, but they couldn't have our bell.
When do you ring the bell?
The bell is rung every Sunday for, as part of the welcoming thing. We often, during a memorial service or funeral service or whatever, will have a quiet time at the end of the service and the tolling of the bell. That is often used by people that have their services here. So it is used and cherished. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Please